Walk into an American home in 1985, and the first thing that hits you isn't something you see. It's the feeling in the air. A faint haze of cigarette smoke, the chemical sweetness of hairspray drifting from down the hall, something warm cooking. Then it settles over you all at once. The whole room glows in colors no one decorates with anymore. A machine in the corner is blinking at you, and the phone is somewhere it could never be today. This was home, and almost none of it still exists. Let's step inside. The front door opens into a world of color that would make a modern designer wince. The heavy, earthy tones of the 1970s were finally fading, and America had swung hard in the opposite direction. Soft pastels took over everything. Dusty pinks, cool blues, warm peachy tones, the kind of palette that felt fresh and modern and optimistic at the time. Television had made this look aspirational, and suddenly, living rooms across the country carried that same airy, sun-washed feeling. Walls were often papered rather than painted, patterned with small repeating prints and finished with a decorative border running along the top of the room like trim on a gift. The floor underfoot was thick, wall-to-wall carpet, soft enough that you'd sink slightly with every step and lose small things in it for days. The furniture was large and low and built for a whole family to pile onto, upholstered in the bold patterns that defined the era. Glass and shiny metallic accents caught the light everywhere you looked, on tabletops, on lamps, on frames. There was a warmth to it all, a lived-in coziness, the sense of a room that a family actually spent its evenings in together. Against one whole wall stood the true heart of the 1980s home, a large media cabinet built to hold the wave of new technology reshaping family life. At its center sat the television, still deep and boxy and surprisingly heavy, but bigger now than the sets people grew up with and treated with a certain reverence. Around it were arranged the devices that were quietly rewriting what a home could do. Chief among them was the machine that changed everything about how families spent their evenings. For the first time, people had control over their own television. You could capture a show and keep it. You could bring a movie home and watch it on your own couch, on your own schedule. The device glowed with a small clock display that, in most homes, blinked endlessly because no one ever managed to set it. Stacks of labeled tapes grew beside it over the years, some bought, most recorded off the air in handwriting that faded over time. And resting in a place of honor nearby was the remote control, chunky and satisfying to press, and the cause of more family squabbles than anyone would admit. Cable had reached most homes by the middle of the decade, and it felt like a small miracle. Instead of a handful of channels, there were suddenly dozens. Music all day long, movies without interruption, news that never stopped, a whole expanded universe humming out of that one glowing box in the corner, and the family gathered around it night after night. Now let's move toward the kitchen, because the kitchen in the 1980s was where the future arrived first. The whole room had a particular look, warm, slightly dated feeling colors on the appliances, patterned surfaces meant to imitate stone, a general sense of a space that was practical and cheerful and always a little bit busy. The refrigerator hummed away, its door a chaotic collage of children's drawings, school papers, and shopping lists pinned up under a scatter of magnets. Inside were the everyday staples of the era, the powdered drinks and molded desserts and stackable containers that filled American kitchens from coast to coast. But the real revolution sat glowing and beeping on the counter. The microwave had become a standard fixture, and it changed how families ate almost overnight. Food that once took the better part of an hour could now be hot in minutes. Freezer aisles filled with meals designed specifically for it. The smell of popcorn puffing up became the unofficial scent of movie night, and parents everywhere warned their kids not to stand too close while it ran, half convinced the invisible waves would do something terrible to them. On the wall hung the object modern kids simply cannot picture, the telephone. It was fixed in place, its coiled cord stretched over years into a long, tangled mess that could just barely reach around the corner. When it rang, the entire house heard it, and you answered with no idea who was on the other end. People carried dozens of phone numbers around in their heads because there was no other way. And when a teenager wanted a private conversation, they dragged that cord as far as it would go and murmured into a corner, praying no one lifted another phone in the house to listen in. Later in the decade, the cordless phone appeared, and the freedom to walk around while you talked felt like science fiction, even if the reception hissed and the range gave out the moment you wandered too far from the base. And there was the small machine that greeted you when you came home, blinking a light to tell you someone had called. You'd press the button and lean in with the whole family as the recorded voices played back. Getting the outgoing greeting just right was its own little production, redone again and again until it sounded perfect. Before we head deeper into the house, if you're enjoying this walk back in time and want to explore more of how Americans really lived, consider subscribing. There's so much more of this vanished world left to uncover. Now let's go where the kids spent their time. Somewhere in the house, the den, the basement, a quiet corner, sat the newest arrival of all, the home computer. These machines were beginning to find their way into ordinary households, loading programs with a grinding, whirring sound and glowing text onto the screen. Kids used them for games. Parents used them for writing and household numbers. And a brand new anxiety took hold across the country. The fear that children needed to master these machines or risk being left behind. Schools were building computer rooms. Learning to type was suddenly framed as preparing for the future itself. By the end of the decade, a few families had a way to connect their computers to the outside world, and doing so produced one of the strangest sounds in the house, a screeching electronic handshake, followed by text crawling onto the screen one slow line at a time. The internet as we know it didn't exist yet, but in those quiet corners, without anyone quite realizing it, the foundation of the entire modern world was being laid. Now go down the hall to the kids' bedrooms, because those rooms were shrines to everything a kid loved. The walls were covered in posters taped up crooked, a dream car nobody's family could afford, a favorite movie, a band, an athlete, whatever a kid worshiped that year. Furniture and bedding often came matched in coordinated sets, the kind of thing a parent picked out from a department store catalog. A portable stereo sat somewhere within reach, perfect for the sacred art of making mixtapes. A kid could sit for what felt like hours with a finger hovering over the record button, waiting for the radio to finally play the right song, cursing when the announcer talked over the intro and ruined the tape. Scattered across the floor were the toys and games that defined childhood in that decade. The home video game system had arrived, and it changed play forever. Kids blowing into cartridges that refused to work, though nobody ever knew why that helped. There were action figures, puzzles, and the colorful plastic-scented clutter of a childhood spent mostly indoors when the weather turned. It was a room built entirely around a kid's own private world. Step into the bathroom and the error hits you again, this time as a cloud you could practically see. Big Hair took real effort, and the counter reflected it. Cans and bottles and tools all dedicated to achieving height and volume. The whole room usually followed a single color scheme, tile and towels and rugs all coordinated to match, part of the decade's love of everything tied together in one look. Now let's talk about the things you felt in that home rather than saw. The thermostat was a small dial on the wall, and in most homes a parent guarded it like treasure. "I'm not paying to heat the whole neighborhood" was practically a national catchphrase. In winter, you wore a sweater indoors and dealt with it. In summer, unless the family had central air, you relied on window units that rattled and dripped, or a fan wedged into a window doing its loud, valiant best against the heat. Smoking happened indoors, everywhere, without a second thought. The smell simply lived in the fabric of the furniture and the drapes, part of the air of the era in a way that's hard to imagine now. And then there were the sounds. The mechanical clunk of a tape sliding into place, the pop of the toaster, the specific ring of that wall phone cutting through the house, the theme songs bleeding from the television as the family gathered for the shows everyone watched at the same time because there was no other way to watch them. If you missed an episode, you waited months for it to come around again and hoped. The living room at night is where the family came together, and this is the part people remember most. There was one television that mattered, and the whole family watched it together. You couldn't scatter off into separate screens and separate rooms because separate screens didn't exist. So you negotiated, you compromised, you watched what everyone could agree on, and in doing so, you were simply together in one room at one time. Friday nights had their own ritual. The family piled into the car and drove to the video rental store, walking the aisles under bright lights, reading the backs of boxes, hoping the movie everyone wanted was actually in stock. The new releases were always picked clean. You brought your choice home, made the popcorn, and gathered on the couch in the glow of that big boxy set. And when it was over, you rewound the tape before returning it, because the sticker told you to be kind and rewind, and the people who didn't were quietly regarded as monsters. Dinner, more often than not, still happened at a table with everyone present. The television might murmur in the next room, but the meal itself was a gathering. Homework got done at the kitchen table under a parent's tired eye. Board games came out of the closet on slow evenings. Photo albums were assembled by hand. Actual printed pictures slid into sticky pages because every photo cost money and you didn't even know how any of them had turned out until you picked them up from the store a week later. That was the strange gift of the 1980s home. It was smaller in its reach and bigger in its presence. You couldn't be anywhere but where you were, with the people who were actually there. There was no drifting away from the table into a glowing rectangle. There was no reaching a friend in an instant. If you wanted to talk to someone, you called their house and a parent answered, and you asked politely if they could come to the phone. Connection took effort, and maybe that's exactly why it meant so much. The house had boundaries you could feel. The walls held the family in one shared space. The technology, primitive as it was, pulled everyone toward the same room instead of scattering them into separate worlds. And the whole home carried a warmth that was partly the thermostat someone refused to touch, and partly something you only understand now, looking back on it from so far away. If you grew up inside a home like this, you already know that it's gone. The wallpaper was stripped away. The wall phone was unbolted and thrown out. The carpet was torn up and replaced. The big cabinet and the heavy television were hauled to the curb. The house may still be standing somewhere, but the world that lived inside it has vanished completely. And yet, close your eyes and you're back there. The blinking clock that no one ever set. The smell of popcorn and hairspray and the couch. Your whole family in one room, in that soft pastel glow, together before everything changed. Hold that memory close. It's more precious than you knew. And if this brought that home back to life for you, share it with someone who lived there too.